All right, let's come together, and I want to pick on the table in the back. That's you, Paul, and there's no backer table than you. What were you, some of you guys, doing at age 24? What did life look like?
I was supposed to remember
that. I figured both of you together maybe you could remember.
I was born at 24. We were married, and we had 2 children by the time I was 24.
Okay. Okay.
And I don't regret any of it.
No. Do you mind, for context, telling us what year you were born?
37.
1937. Okay. So you're silent, because the first boomers are 1946. So you're silent generation. You're married with 2 kids. At that 24. What about the rest of you guys? What was going on at 24? You're in the Air Force? Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yep.
I had been married a year and was going to college. I finished seminary and went to college.
Okay. All right. Vic and Kate, what were you guys doing at 24?
We just had our first date.
Okay. There you go.
Vic was working at GM.
Yeah. How long have you been working at GM at that point, Vic?
6 years. I hired in at 18.
Okay. How long did you work for GM in your life? Total? About 40? Okay. All right. Some other people of different generations. What are you doing?
Gen X, 72. I had just purchased my own house. I was living on my own. Hadn't started dating him yet.
Okay.
I was working 2 jobs. I was teaching and I was youth pastor, directing, just being female waiting for the one.
Sure. Okay. I like that. Others, what were you doing at 24? Livy, you are?
22.
And Ainsley, you are?
24.
Okay. So what are you doing now? What do you think you'll be doing in 2 years?
In 2 years, I will be finishing my first year of PA school and going, or maybe in the middle of my second one. It's
Okay.
weird when they start.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Ainsley, what are you up to?
Job searching right now, and then as of right now, I'm subbing at
Okay. All right.
jobs.
All right. Anybody else want to jump in? What you doing at 24? Anything interesting, Heather?
It's interesting. I was living in Chicago, working multiple jobs, had finished grad school. Andy and I were dating, but not, I think I got engaged when I was 24.
Okay.
That's a normal thing people do. Yeah, a couple roommates.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're just going to table that for a little while. We'll table what all that means. And again, it's not right or wrong, but it's quite different. Things change. You can even see going from the table in the front to the table in the back to the table in the front. There is, lots of movement with already at a job where you've been at 6 years, already a couple of kids, to just getting rolling with some of that, or maybe half of that's not even on the horizon. Different generations. All right. So where we are today is last week we talked about iGen. And so iGen is the generation that is now 13 to 30 years old. Okay? And so we talked about them a little bit last week, all their characteristics, and spent some time talking about them. This week we're going to talk about their particular phase of life. Because all of them right now are either adolescents or what is called emerging adults. And if that's a new phrase, I highly recommend this book by Jeffrey Arnett. So it's a phrase that really became popular around the year 2000. So in terms of sociology, it's a relatively new phase. What they've talked about, if you look at the 1900s, there used to be adolescents. And then there was early adolescence, late adolescence, which was kind of early was middle school, late was high school. Then as the century went on, there became early, middle, and late. So early junior high, middle high school, late college, and beyond. What happened around the year 2000, and Jeffrey Arnett is one of the leaders of that, is he said, I don't like early, middle, late. We need to call 18 to 29-year-olds something different. So he has started calling 18 to 29-year-olds emerging adults. I didn't come across that probably until about 15 years ago when I was asked to teach a class at the seminary at Cornerstone on a sociology of adolescence. And so the more I started reading about adolescence and things like that, the more I started coming into emerging adulthood. I like it. I think it's a good phrase for a variety of reasons. So for that reason, tonight, we're going to spend most of our time on emerging adulthood. The amount of literature and information on adolescence is pretty overwhelming. So we'll talk a little bit of adolescence at the beginning, but I kind of want to rush that conversation, to be honest with you, so we can slow down and talk about emerging adulthood just a little bit. But before we get there, another question that we may or may not resolve right away, but we're just getting things on the table. When is a person an adult? When they can financially support themselves? Okay. Other thoughts? When's a person an adult? What do you think? Now recommended to be an adult at 45. Yes. What'd you say, Libby?
I said you'd be shocked how young they are. Like,
Okay, so if we go adulthood via colonoscopy, it's going down. The age. Okay, fair enough. Other thoughts of when you become an adult? Which is?
No, I said, when can you be tried as an adult?
I believe 18.
Sometimes younger.
Okay. All right. There's some fuzziness there, Heather? Okay, fair enough. Now that's fascinating. Let's take American legal code and American culture. When does an American become an adult? Well, there's 18, but not everything's accessible to an 18-year-old in America. Right? There's no alcohol. You can emancipate at 16. That's interesting, Kim. Okay.
Yeah, they legalized drinking at 18 when I was a senior in high school, and then they quickly repented of that like a couple years later.
Yeah.
To be because of you.
Well, it's funny you say that because my mom just brought that up the other day. We were talking about something, and what was it called? What was the 2.5% beer called that you could drink when she was in college? 18-year-olds could drink the. Is that what was it? 3.2. All right. Not strong enough for Jeff.
I think your frontal lobe develops at like 25.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It's giving your mental capacity is to the point where you're taking more responsibility and relying on your parents.
Okay.
So at 16, if you're emancipated, you're already taking more responsibility. than
Interesting.
what they were.
Okay. So maybe a little bit of a moving target, you're saying? All right. All right. All right. Let's talk adolescence. Let's try to rush this conversation just a little bit to get to emerging adulthood. Adolescence, this is hard because we have a homophone here that confuses things. Adolescence with a CE is the phase of life. Adolescence with a TS are the people. All right? So you'll just have to figure out which one I'm talking about. This, I think, is probably the best definition. Adolescence begins in puberty and ends in culture. It seems that historically everybody acknowledges a change at puberty. When one is able to reproduce, procreate, that historically in almost all cultures is a significant change. Now, have some cultures throughout the world and throughout history gone immediately from childhood to adulthood because they've passed through puberty? But cultures do funny things over time. and they have different definitions. So Jen mentioned supporting ourselves. Jeff mentioned financially independent. Some Southeast Asian countries define it as to when you can support your parents. Different way of looking at it. That's when you're adult. When you're stable enough to provide support for your parents. Israel, complete your 2 mandatory years of military. That's a big one for Israeli adulthood. So different cultures, different things. Look at America. So this is kind of American history. There's a couple of really good books about this. If you look at very early America, 17th and 18th century, the 16 and 1700s, they didn't care so much about age. Size was more important than age. If you were a burly, strong 12-year-old, you're of more value than a scrawny 16-year-old because you're working on the land for the family, right? So in some ways, it wasn't always even age early on. It was size and ability to help provide for the family. You know, Industrial Revolution comes along. There's factory work. School starts coming into play, but school is now in play for the wealthy. School is a rich people kind of thing for a while. 1900, if you ever study psychology, G. Stanley Hall is the big adolescence guy in 1904, and he's the one that kind of characterized adolescence as a horrific phase of life. We just need to shut them away for a few years because they're unpredictable and crazy, and then we'll bring them out later. That's all G. Stanley Hall talk. But also in the early 1900s is because of the Industrial Revolution is when labor laws came into play. So now they're being kicked out of the factories. And now they're being kicked back into other places. In 1920, about a third of 16, 17-year-olds are in high school. And high school at that point is preparation for life. You got shop, you got all different types of classes that you're assuming you're going to hit adulthood about 18. In the 1930s is when half of American teenagers started being enrolled in high school. And then after that, high school, part of the reason was the Depression. We need to save jobs for moms and dads. What do we do with the kids? Kick them into school. Okay. After that, youth start getting involved in high school. And then that over time becomes college prep. Think about ministry to a 16-year-old over the 1900s. Looks different almost every decade, right? Contextualization. When are they an adult in America? It changes. Because adulthood, adolescence begins in puberty and ends in adulthood whenever that culture defines adulthood. And sometimes, like America, we define it differently based upon law and expectation and things like that. There's not a standard definition. This is a good graph. I've always liked this one because, again, it kind of shows, I use this a lot when teaching youth ministry classes because we're talking about youth ministry, and you say, boy, how youth ministry has changed over the years. Because, again, it's 1930s when half the population is now enrolled in high school. But half are not. And now, 95% are enrolled in high school. Very different ministry to a teenager. Very different ministry. Yeah.
Point though, if you graduated from 8th grade in 1930, you had a pretty good education.
Yeah.
I mean, they had to take a test to get a diploma, and I've seen that test. It's a tough test.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be almost like a high school diploma.
Yeah.
In an inner city situation. Maybe even a lot better.
And that's not that long ago. And if you think about that, so now you're 13, 14 years old, but you're done with school.
Yes.
Which means you're out there trying to provide a little bit, right?
Probably working at a farm situation.
Sure. Yeah. Being an apprentice for the first couple of hundred years of American history was a big thing. You know, you get big young boys. Doesn't matter how much school they've had. Yeah. Again, this all goes back to this idea of contextualization. What we've talked about with Keller is that we want to give Bible answers, but they're asking different questions at different times, and they look differently. 16-year-olds over the last 125 years are doing very, very different things. Therefore, ministry looks very, very different to a 16-year-old over the last 20 decades. Just very different. Remember we did Erickson a couple weeks ago when we thought, what kinds of questions are people in different life phases asking? And so if you follow Erickson and what he has said, he talks about adolescence, a traditional definition of adolescence being junior high and high school, because he's writing in the 50s and 60s. The conflict is identity. They're trying to develop an identity. Who am I? Where am I going? And then he says, by the time you get to 19 and older, the crisis is more intimacy versus isolation. Am I loved? Do I have someone to love? So again, these are the big questions that they're asking, maybe not out loud, maybe not consciously, but they're asking them. I want to give you, moving through adolescence real quick, I want to give you one more thing and then we'll stop and talk about adolescence, but I told you I wanted to go quickly. This is something that I've always really liked as a follow-up to Erik Erikson, because he just kind of does the crisis at each life phase, and you have to successfully move beyond the crisis. James Marcia was another psychologist who tried to move beyond Erikson. And what he said is that's a little too simplistic. So when we're talking about identity formation, especially adolescence, right? Identity formation. Let's look at it in two ways. One, commitment to an identity. Rock solid, I believe this is who I am and this is why I'm here. And exploration for identity. How actively am I exploring the options? What Marcia has done is Marcia has then developed 4 primary quadrants of identity formation for an adolescent. One is identity diffusion. Low commitment to identity. They don't know who they are, but they don't really give a rip. There's no exploration going on. Okay? Identity moratorium. There's a low commitment. I don't know who I am, but I'm really working on it. I'm listening. I'm thinking. I'm studying options out there. There's identity foreclosure, which is I'm committed to identity, but I haven't really thought about it. It's just been given to me. And I'm going to accept it without thought. And then there's what Marcia says is the goal, identity achievement, where you have done a lot of exploration, you've done a lot of thinking, but you've landed and you are committed to an identity. Let's think about these things in Christian identity terms. Okay? Here's my thought on adolescence. I think parents fear the moratorium. If you are a parent of an adolescent, don't fear identity moratorium, because they are exploring, they are questioning, they are actively learning. Parents are comfortable with identity foreclosure. That's a bad place to be for Christian families, because they simply believe I'm a Christian because mom and dad told me I'm a Christian. They're not exploring it. They're not thinking about it. Obviously, the goal is Christian identity achievement. We want them to have thought it through, explored, and decided for themselves that Christ is Lord. But I think second best is moratorium. This freaks parents out because they're not committed to an identity yet. But if they're actively exploring, still engaged in church, still listening to the Word of God, that's good. You don't want them to become Pharisees who say, hey, mom and dad are Christians, therefore I'm Christian. Not a great place to be. Let's talk about adolescence, but let me give Jeff and Heather the floor just for a quick moment. In terms of nurturing a Christian identity in Jackson and your girls, what were some of the things you tried to do that you thought you did well? Maybe if you had a chance, what would you slightly tweak? Think about identity formation of middle school or high schooler. You're trying to push towards identity achievement. You know what I'm saying? What'd you guys do?
Well, I think initially what comes to mind is because being a Christian is who we are to our core, not something we just did on Sundays or did out. So I think that was part of it, that was part of our conversation, part of trying to lead them to exploring and discovering who they were.
You mean just by practices?
By practice,
And
yeah.
okay,
So,
I like that.
Examples would be praying about things, not just like, oh, I can't think of a great example of that. Or I can remember several days dropping them off, and there'd be something to talk about. And I don't remember now what would be the thing, and we would have to go through before they got out. They had to give me 10 things that God said about who they were, because they were so. Honestly, I don't remember now what the things were. They were fighting with each other evidently.
Oh.
One. And so before I would let them out of the car, we'd have to go through just that the practice of, I even remember having the practice of gratitude of like, okay, we're in this complaining stage. Let's practice gratitude, and that's for me too.
I like
wasn't just for
Yeah.
them.
I like that. Practices of recalling scripture, practices of what does God say, practices of giving thanks. I like that.
One of the first times we did that, some of you that have been here a while know that years ago we did a Christmas musical that was based on the names of God. And I don't even know if I can tell the story without crying, but we had just learned the song. It's all the names of God. It was ABCs of Praise, and it was all the names of God. And my mom was in a horrific bike accident that almost took her life. In fact, it'll be like 17 years tomorrow is the day. So it's fresh in my mind just thinking about it every year. And we told the kids about it in the morning, and Jackson's very close to my mom and was really upset. And the only thing I could think to do in that moment was sing this ABCs of Praise, because I didn't know, I hadn't been to the hospital yet. We weren't sure what we were going to, we thought we probably were going to be, we didn't know.
Yeah.
We didn't know what it was going to be. And I remember going through that song with him. When we got to, there's a part that says healer. He's our healer. And we stopped, and he looked at me and he said, well, if he can create her, he can heal her too.
Okay.
And that was just that moment in that of just bringing back to who God is.
I like that. I'm curious, other thoughts, because again, we're pausing to at different life phases and stuff. Let's think middle schoolers and high schoolers, okay, early and middle adolescence. What things help nurture a Christian identity? Allowing them to explore, but pointing them towards Christ and their Christian identity. What kinds of things are helpful, or maybe you experience were the opposite of helpful that sometimes we fall into? What do you think, Anna?
Well, I often think back to youth group and just how, and I think this would be like good for in families in general, but how we would talk about controversial things like evolution and creationism and different things like that. That if you, that again, like you're going to have to explore at some point, but being able to explore it in a Christian environment, but also there is safety to like argue either way or whatever. And so I think that I always think back to that, and that was very helpful. And I think maybe, I don't know, it's tough because it's good to like always remind your kids of the truth, but also at some point giving them the safety of questioning things, because like I don't know if I felt like, growing up, like not that it wasn't safe to do that, but I think, I just always knew I would get the Christian answer back. Whereas in youth group, I appreciated that we could like explore things, and there was no like, I don't know, it was just a safe place to explore those things, but also the security of knowing that the basis of what we were talking about was truth. Like,
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't explain that well.
Forcing exploration a little bit.
Yeah.
And helping people think, and especially at a certain age because of cognitive development, like Heather talked about a couple weeks ago. You don't force the toddlers, to explore the options as well, but adolescents, you do.
That's it. I mean, as you become an adult.
Absolutely.
Just,
Absolutely
you're gonna
right.
have more
Yeah.
responsibility and things like that.
Yeah. Other thoughts? What's helpful? What's harmful in nurturing a Christian identity in adolescence, do you think?
I don't know if this is helpful, but something just to think of mine is like you kind of have to have your identity as a parent figured out in order to help guide your kids through. Because you can't have honest conversations with your kids about God if you yourself don't understand who God is.
Okay.
I mean, I guess you can do it together.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
But generally speaking, what I have seen a lot of times stereotypically is parents tend to shut questions down because they don't have answers.
Okay.
Or they're not comfortable with even if they have the questions, they're not comfortable answering them because they're worried about what might happen. What the kids might think.
So
I
I like that.
You have to know who you are
Yeah.
through their process.
I like that though, because you said both. We're ministering out of our own identity achievement, but we're still exploring some things and trying to learn some things. We can do it together. Ain't nothing wrong with that. You know? Yeah. Any other thoughts? Heather?
I think like shifting from like either or to a, like really trying to embrace a both and kind of approach. For example, it's you either have confidence or questions. When it could be, you could have both confidence and questions. Like there can be ways that you can hold this both and concept, and even talking about Christian community, it's either great and perfect and wonderful or bad and no, or
Sure.
it's amazing and wonderful and healing and challenging and difficult sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Like, so allowing kids and grown-ups like space enough, kind of what Anna was saying about the safety, like space
Yeah.
enough to have a both and
Yeah.
conversation. Like these two different things seem like they might not fit, but they can. Like
Yeah.
they both.
I like that. Allowing exploring of some of the nuances. You know, like you said, Christian community is not simple. We are a community of sinners and broken people. So there will be fighting among us. There will be all of those things. Yeah. Yeah, Anna.
Just real briefly, and like you were saying, parents shouldn't be afraid of that. And that's the beauty, is that like God is going to stand up under questions and testing because he is the answer. It is true. And so not being afraid of that, because like it's only if God weren't that we should be afraid of questions, because you're gonna find out that he's not as good as we thought he was, but he is. So
Yeah.
he'll stand up under those questions.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, Fred.
I think that what is important in this area is for parents to model
Certainly.
different things. My parents taught me a lot of things in spiritual sense. In fact, my father used to say on Friday night, "You want to go with me tomorrow?" Now, I knew what that meant, but what he did was he took me out to a cemetery. It was quiet and peaceful, and he said, "No, we're going to have prayer time and we're going to Bible study." And so that challenged me to realize that, that has to be part of my life. And Dad was giving me the illustration by taking me out there and doing it. And I'll be honest with you, when my father died, I thought, God, who's going to pray for me now? Because I knew he was praying for me, and that was part of his identity achievement in that spiritual aspect of life.
Yeah. I like that, Fred, because that reminds me, I tell parents not to be afraid of the moratorium, but if you know your kids are in moratorium, you still are intentional as can be, because you want to help them explore, right? It's not a passive moratorium.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? It's okay, I acknowledge your questioning, and I'm going to respect that, but let me speak into you intentionally. Yeah, I like that.
Well, actually now, I look for cemeteries to go pray in.
Okay, yeah.
It's kind of a weird sort of thing, but it's
Right.
something that my father had built into me, and it is a quiet place. And by the way, the residents there don't move around very much. A lot of disturbance.
Well, let me move. I told you I wanted to rush the adolescence conversation. That's a ginormous topic, right? But I do want to move on to emerging adulthood. And so I've already kind of talked about how emerging adulthood came about. So kind of the way Jeffrey Arnett and some of the other sociologists talk is when they talk about adolescence, they talk about early and middle. Early is middle school, middle is high school, but we no longer want to call 18 and above late adolescence. They recommend calling them emerging adults. Why? Well, for one, they're no longer an adolescent. Because if you think about a typical unlike an adolescent who are wholly dependent upon their parents, usually, emerging adults tend to be freer from their parents. Maybe not 100%, still might be financially dependent, but they are freer in terms of time, choice, things like that. They are more independent. Most 18 to 29-year-olds are not living at home. At least they're not living at home consistently. They're coming and going. 6 months here, 1 month home, 3 months there, right? They've reached physical maturity, not cognitive. I forget, maybe it's Heather that you mentioned that, right? Because prefrontal cortex is probably 24, 25, 26. So maybe not full cognitive maturity, but physical maturity and more developed cognitive maturity. They're not all in school. That's a big deal. Not all emerging adults are in college. Not all 18, 19, 20-year-olds are in college, but they haven't always achieved the quote-unquote traditional. This depends upon the culture, but marriage, parenthood, career, things like that. Most of those today, for today's iGen, today's emerging adults, have not done that, maybe haven't even begun. Arnett will say that it will take the average emerging adult 5 years out of college to find their first job that will last more than 5 years. Vic had that job at 17. It's going to take most of them into their late 20s to get that first. That's just the trend, the way things are. So again, this is Jeffrey Arnett. His book is really, really good. He breaks down emerging adulthood, relationship with parents, sex lives, religious lives, and how they feel. And the book is just full of stuff we're not going to be able to get into tonight. But I want to give you the why this gap, right? So why this emerging adulthood now? Why are we taking this age range from 18 to 29? We've talked all class about how we are entering a slow life strategy, right? Not day-to-day life, but in terms of accomplishing these tasks. It's slow. But why is it delayed? Why is there such a gap between puberty and achieving those things? He suggests a few things. One, a technological revolution. We are now in a service and a high-tech economy rather than a farming, fishing, forestry economy. More education is required. That delays because it's no longer the 8th grader, Vic. It's no longer the 12th grader for a lot of jobs. It's beyond, okay? So that changes things. More technology, the birth control pill. Family planning is more possible than it was 50 years ago, okay? You can delay childbearing. The women's movement. In terms of women outnumber men in college. And so the women's movement of the last 50 years has increased all of these things, which has delayed when women are going to school more and working, marriage and child rearing is delayed. Okay? And he argues, boomers, there's a youth movement because the late boomers, especially those who were young in the 60s, did not trust authority and did not trust old people. So there's a desire to not become old. Or you'll become one of the untrustworthy ones, right? So, 5 major characteristics of emerging adults. And I'm going to go through this quickly because then we're just going to use the last 20 minutes or so to talk about these things. Number 1, they are in the midst of identity explorations. This is where I think Erickson is outdated because he believed that identity exploration was adolescents 12 to 18 years old. I no longer think that's true. Emerging adults are still exploring their identity. They're exploring, what do I want to do with my life in terms of career? What is my relationship like? Do I want to get married? I don't even know what to look for in somebody to get married, right? They're clarifying who they are, what they're good at, and what they want out of life. Now, in this regard, failures and disappointments can be helpful, right? And that's one of the advantages of emerging adulthood. You can move in and out of careers to explore some. You can move in and out of majors. They move in and out of relationships. But there's still, it's a heavy period of exploration. As soon as we stop this, as soon as I get through the 5, I'm going to ask Ainsley and Olivia to tell us if they agree with these things or where you might disagree. Number 2, instability. There are shifting choices in love and work make this life stage not only exceptionally full, intense, but also exceptionally unstable. Think about where they live. Many 18 to 29-year-olds are moving quite regularly. If you're out of state in college, you're moving in August for 4 months, then back for a month, and then January for 4 more months, and then back for 3 months. People do this with careers, right? Internships. They're living in different places. And even if they're at college in 4 years, they're living in a different place every year sometimes. So where they call home, where they put their head down every night, it's different. Jobs are different. They change schools, right? It's just a period of instability. Don't take that negatively. It's just changing. This is a good graph. Change of residence in the past year by age. Notice how the 18 to 29 are changing residences all the time. Whereas your 40s, 50s, and 60s, we don't change residences as much. Tend to be a little more settled, a little more stable into where you are. Self-focus. Don't take this as sinful selfishness. It can be, but don't take it that way. Children answer to parents and teachers. Parents answer to spouse and other responsibilities. Emerging adults have nobody to answer to often. Not married. They don't have any kids. Might be independent from their home. Who do they got to worry about? Who do they got to support? They can focus on themselves. They don't have to worry about anybody. Again, that doesn't mean sinful selfishness. It's just, again, not necessarily selfish, but maybe normal and temporary. Emerging adults feel in between because they're in this process of they're accepting more responsibility for themselves. They're making more independent decisions. They're becoming financially independent, but they're not there yet. So they kind of feel in between, right? Hence the emerging adulthood. I'm not quite there, but I'm getting there, and it's on the horizon, but I'm not quite there. And the last one is possibilities and optimism. It tends to be an age of high hopes and great expectations, in part because few of their dreams have been tested in the fires of real life. Plus, they can change. I get job A, I don't like it, I'll go to job B. I start out at college A, I don't like it, I'll just move to college B. And the options and the ability to move around. So Arnett says, these are the big five. This is kind of what characterizes emerging adulthood. We have to start thinking about, therefore, what does ministry look like to somebody that's in this life phase? Ainsley, agree, disagree with some of these? What would you highlight?
I agree with all of them. The feeling in between, I would probably emphasize a little bit more because I just realized how I feel that I really identify with that, where I feel like I'm in between these two big life stages of college, which took me a little bit longer than most college stories, and then I don't have my adult career where I'm gonna hopefully be not have to switch every year or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I just am like, I would maybe use the word stuck sometimes with that, is that you're kind of just like you're stuck in this stage until you get to move on to the next big thing. But I think most of those, I have seen them in myself and then also the people around me in that age.
Okay. Libby, what do you think about these?
I agree with all of them and have felt all of them like in the last 6 months. I think the one for me that is the most sticks with me the most is the instability of just moving a lot. I remember the first time my freshman year of college, having to pack a suitcase to go to my own house was like the weirdest experience. I was like, what do you mean I don't live here anymore? But then I also did live at school, like it was school, not home. It was very weird, and then I don't think that has changed even since graduating, like living at home. I don't want to live at home for the rest of my life, so that's not going to be where I land. And so it's just lots of moving, lots of changing careers, I've had a different job in the last 6 months. Like I changed jobs.
Yeah.
In the last 6 months. That's a change.
Typical emerging adult.
Yeah. So
Would you guys say, Ainsley and Olivia, he uses the term optimism. All of these things could also be anxiety provoking. Would you lean towards optimism, or would you lean towards anxiety and frustration because of these things?
I think at one point for emerging adults in like the generations, it could have possibly been optimism. Just like the more hopeful generations. I think iGen is such a generation that has suffered from so much mental illness or mental problems like that I don't think any of us see it as optimism.
Okay.
It's all stress and anxiety and frustration. You can see all your like college friends are kind of getting past all of that, and here I am
anxiety and frustration than it used to be, or what I would think they thought.
Okay.
They could also probably think that it was anxiety filled too.
Those millennials who Noah Fortis says is the greatest generation on earth, I mean, they were optimistic about it, right? Livy, you agree with that?
I think it also depends on like what you're looking at. So like Ainsley is struggling to find jobs, and that's really frustrating, and that's common for people coming out of college. I know very few people who got their a job right out of college and are not still searching 3 months after, or
Yeah.
4 months, 5 months after graduation, however long it's been. But like for me, I would say I'm a little bit more optimistic because I am going on to more school and I'm in the process of getting acceptance letters, and like looking on the horizon is more full of possibilities rather than getting told no from a job. Every job, everything. Like,
Fair.
I think that changes it too.
Okay.
In this age, is like where your job is at.
Fair enough. All right, let's do this. We're going to take a 1 minute break and maybe a 2 minute break. I want everybody to write down one way that we could minister to emerging adults. And again, we're not defining ministry as Sunday morning church. It could be that, but it could be as a grandparent to an emerging adult, a parent to an emerging adult, a mentor to an emerging adult, an employer to an emerging adult. Everybody write down one, and then we're going to share them, and we're going to have Ainsley and Olivia evaluate us. So how do you minister, right? How do you minister to a young man or a young woman, 18 to 29-year-old, who is experiencing this? What do you think? Take a couple minutes to write it down. Bless you.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think he probably did so. That was 2000, so iGEM's were only 5. So he probably did his research on certainly millennials, maybe a little bit of change. My guess is he has a new volume of that book out that I have not opened. My guess is he would say because he'll extend the age of emerging adults. You know what I mean? Because of it. Right. Yes. No. Right. Yes. And the only reason that's because they're currently in it. Yeah. But no, I think you're right. And that's where his research, I think, would have been. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I need to see if these babies can, because he actually created there's like a society for emerging adulthood. There's a lot of stuff now. Yeah.
All right, a little bit more. Come up with a, what does it look like to minister to them? Curious what you came up with. Again, iGens are 13 to 30. So most iGens are currently emerging adults. Lots of people to minister to in this generation. How do we do it? Give me some of your examples. Bethany.
I put down hospitality.
What do you mean by that?
When I was in college, I got plugged into a church the last 2 years of college that they had a great college ministry where there were some families who invited us to their home for meals and dinner and really invested and poured into us. And I think like talking about how people feel that instability, like that gave me that sense of home that I was craving throughout. And so like having that home cooked meal, having somebody who to me reminded me of my mom when I was away at college, like that really spoke volumes to me. And then like as I went out of college, like that was something that was so formational to me that I was
I like that. Hospitality. That's a good one, Bethany. Others? Anna.
My first one was just being a consistent person, which is similar. But another one I was thinking of is like just giving, like for people in that generation in the church too, like give them opportunities to serve and be committed to other people, like encouraging them to be part of a small group, or encouraging like, hey, there's an opportunity to serve here, because I think sometimes in that stage of life you can get one so self-focused it's very stressful because you're always trying to figure things out, and then also it just I know, but I feel like that is a really anchoring thing as well.
Okay.
Like, because you only have yourself to answer to and to be responsible for, sometimes it's nice to have that when you aren't to a place yet where you have a family that you're responsible for, or relationships that you're responsible for, still having a sense of responsibility for other people, that you're caring for other people, that you're serving them, and that you're committed to.
Okay, yeah, getting plugged in and stuff like that. Opportunities.
And sometimes we're just,
Yeah.
we don't think about it, but sometimes people really appreciate just being invited to serve or invited to do,
Sure.
be committed
Sure.
to something.
And there might be hesitancy on a church or another organization's end because I know you're going to be here 8 months of the year.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't stop us necessarily, right? Because like Bethany said, when you're away from home, we are the new home. You know? Phil, what are you thinking?
Well, kind of along the same lines, but I looked at the self-focus and I realized at that time in life, I was probably more focused and worried about what my peers thought. And that was, I realized, hey, I feel bad about calling mom and dad about everything, but I don't have a family of my own yet. But I've got peers that I can talk to and relate to. And the whole idea, I think, is that I heard somewhere that you will eventually become who your friends are.
Sure.
Well, to use this to help reach out to that group, hey, if you know people who were Christians at that age group, you recommend them and you help build their set of peers to pull them into the Christian life.
Yeah, I like that.
And if you don't share that, because you're not necessarily 20 anymore, well, if you can find a hobby or talk about sports or something, make that other connection first, then eventually you can pull people into Christian.
Sure. Other thoughts? Go ahead. Van X.
I think that's worth expanding on further, because even if it's not for the purpose of pulling them into Christian life, one of the hardest things that I remember in that stage of life is you went from structures that were almost designed to cultivate relationships and friendships and stuff like that. All of a sudden, there's just and you don't know how to meet people, how to even I remember going to churches and they'd be like, "Oh, are you in college?" No. "Oh, are you married?" No. "Oh, well, maybe we have something for you." Like building those communities and building those structures, or even just like encouraging them and helping them and introducing them. Those things are really helpful in that stage when you don't know how to transition to meeting.
I like that. Christy, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to tag along with what both Bethany and he said. Kind of the idea of pulling people in, but also from the perspective of if we're assuming that some of these young adults are also already Christians, something that was super helpful to me at that age, obviously a peer group where I had, other people that had similar values was super important, but also something I found super helpful was the people at that very next stage. For me, I connected to those people by babysitting their kids.
Yeah.
But those people that were married and had kids, or were further along in jobs, or whatever that next thing I was hoping to go to, that were there doing it real time, and were, at least for me when I was younger, maybe not quite as old as my parents, just because that was something that was where I was connecting and I really valued their opinion of me and some of those things. And as I've gotten older, I've started to realize that, people a little older have something to say too. But at the time, you kind of lose touch with that a little bit sometimes.
Sure.
And that was super helpful to me to see them doing what I wanted to be doing
Yeah. Randy, I'm thinking about you as both an employer and maybe a coworker. How do you invest in? Because you invest in a lot of young people that are kind of starting out in their career.
Yeah, why do you call it dinosaur? Because they like them, but it's just, I think a lot of kids, whether they come out of college or they haven't gone to college, I just see a real need or hunger to be mentored.
Mm-hmm.
They don't come out of college with the answers that they need to navigate life. They've got a lot of knowledge, but they don't have the answers they need to be able to handle some life's questions. And I think that there's a great opportunity for older people to mentor them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stuff that we end up talking about are things that you're not going to learn in college.
Yeah.
I'm not going to teach you this kind of stuff in college. But I'll give you some advice on this. I mean, I even, when people come in to interview, a guy came in his pajamas the other day, a pair of flip-flops. Okay? Well, that was an opportunity. I said, you're not going to get the job, but if you don't mind, I'd like to invest in you a little bit, and I'd like to share some things, some advice with you. And I was able to talk to him, kind of like a father, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what his situation was. I don't know if he had a father, didn't have a father, but I thought somebody needs to give this poor man some advice on applying for a job, because he really didn't learn it in school, and didn't learn it from his parents. So, we had a cordial talk, and he was thanked me afterward and said, "Man, I'm really glad I came in." And so, you have an opportunity to invest whatever little experience and knowledge that you have. And
yeah.
I just see that people that are of that age there's a real hunger there. Yeah.
All right, last couple minutes. Ainsley and Olivia, anything that you heard that you want to heartily amen, or something that we missed, or what has been helpful for you, or what's been lacking for you?
I think it's been said, but I think our age, right after college, is the kind of forgotten group in the church. Like it was said, like, are you in college? No, I just graduated. Are you getting married? No. Not
Sure.
anytime soon. And then there's nothing. There's really, it's just kind of, those are the two stages of life that
Yeah.
people are expecting you to be in. And we've been talking about it a lot, and I don't know if I have what I think would work for that. But I think maybe just the knowledge of knowing that this is a group that feels forgotten. And sometimes when you're in college, you still feel forgotten because the church kind of knows. We had this at Iowa, they knew that we weren't going to be there, so they didn't invest in us.
Okay.
So they said, welcome back, and we'll see you next year. But there wasn't, I don't think the pastor or anyone came and tried to get us plugged into the church we went to. So just the knowledge and the idea of, hey, this group of kids, they're not kids, but
Emerging adults.
that they just feel left out of the church. Because, again, I'm not in college and I'm not close to getting married.
Yeah. Libby, final comment, then we'll split.
I think mentorship is huge. I think learning from older people, like some people said, like learning from somebody who's doing the thing you want to do, or even just like those opportunities to like pour into somebody's life. Like, I think it's about I think our group is craving connection, and one way to do that is that mentorship. And also, like who said, we don't know what we're doing. We don't have any of the answers, and so like helping us find those or giving them to us is helpful. I also think that intentionally, I struggled in college not feeling like I could, and even now, feel like I could really plant roots in a church because I don't know where I'm going to be in a year, or I'm going back home in a year, or I don't know what the job's going to look like in a couple years, and I really struggled. And so reaching into that mindset as a church and being like, we are still going to invest you, giving opportunities to serve, things like that, and inviting people to plant roots, even though it's maybe only for 8 months, even though it's small. small, and like Amy said, like, it can feel like we are forgotten, and being intentional about not forgetting.
Appreciate your comments. So, for sake of time, we got to pick up kids. Some of you do. So we will be done. Next week, we are not meeting. Next week is our fall break. So we will not meet on the 15th. When we come back on the 22nd, we will do 2 generations in one night, Lord willing, millennials and Gen X. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.